is a collaboration, and Mona, who is one of the project leaders, will probably present a little bit, and maybe you will say how it comes that we have event here.
Since we formed this latest project, the role of the artist in changing society, because we all thought that artists are really important in the change of society, but is not always recognized for it. So it was a way of trying to highlight where artists really are involved in the society, how it changes, and highlight the different perspectives of culture in the society. Then we met in Brest and developed different research groups that are now starting to work. And one of these research groups is this one, and I don't know how to pronounce this.
Heritagization.
Thank you. I haven't known. It's like it's stuck on my tongue. And we thought that we had this opportunity in '54 to present this, because it is very current in the discussion in Gothenburg as well. And if you have seen what the Biennale in Gothenburg for this year is also a little bit about these questions. Who can tell what is a heritage and what will be saved, and who can decide what will be saved, and also can it be reconstructed or questioned.
Okay, from my left, Ingrid Falk.
Hello.
From Stockholm. Then Elina Niederson from Gothenburg. And Alina Derivanka from Brest, from Belarus. We have two more participants in this group. Is Linda Ted's daughter, and that is her contribution actually. And Chiara Valli. The term that we used to hear, heritage, when we shifted to heritagization, then I think, in my point of view, then we feel own responsibility to what heritage is, what we leave to them next. Right?
In the making.
In the making, yes. Exactly. In this room, on the walls, you see so-called catalog. It's it's Chiara that I named. It's Elina and Alina that together collected examples of heritagization process. They are grouped. They are mixed between Belarus and Sweden, but they are a little bit grouped in an interesting way. There are some projects that talking about when the artists are questioning the authoritarian attitude to the heritage. It's more like that wall. On this wall, it's about the artists dealing with the hidden history or heritage that haven't been publicly presented or included in social and cultural life, or consciously excluded. And here it is much more about the public movements and the kind of city environment, but also public social activities. So it's more about activism in a way. All right. We have few contributions that are, for example, as Linda's project, which is Apocalypse Insurance, waterproof. Linda invited people to send her art books and cultural books, which she vacuum packed and wireproof. Wireproof, yes. Yeah, that's that. It's a so that they can survive global warming and rise of the city, of the seas, and other troubles that we are in.
Good evening. Very nice to be here tonight and walk in project and reflect on a heritage. Since September we learned how to pronounce Heritagization, and it was we succeed in pronouncing it, but then when we need to translate it into Russian, we come to another problem. You need to find an appropriate word for it. So we have actually a number of translation into Russian, just helping people to understand that it's about the process. It's not something stable, but it's about the process. And as Dennis has told, we as cultural researchers choose a number of projects, and in Belarusian cases it's quite recent. All the projects are quite recent. They are within last 4 or 5 years, and and they current, and the artists are around our everyday life actually, and I know all of the artists that are present in here, so if there is a question about the cases you can ask easily. The project I choose to show more, not just like an example, but maybe a little bit more insight, is a project by Viecha Group, and the idea they started to collect old photos and trying to understand what they told us, what they talked to us, and what they talked to us, and they realize that some of them they can be not only perceived as an individual memory but also as a collective memory, and they can kind of tell the bigger story, not just about the family or personal history, but something about the whole country. So this story about these carpets, or Belarusian word will be postilka, this is something quite unique, and it was special for the villages during wartime and after wartime especially. This was quite a poor situation for the village people, and for a long time they were lacking of something that could show their wealth. And these carpets, they at some point became something that could show their something wealthy about them. And that's why when the so-called traveling photographers start to travel from one village to another and were offering these people to make photos of them or their families or friends, so they choose to use these carpets as showing something wealthy they have in their family. And from one side it's like very historical project, but from another, when the project was shown in Minsk, they put these carpets and invited public to make their pictures in front of it, so all the young people can make it, or families. And at this point it was interesting to understand that at this point it was interesting to understand that having we all in this globalized world, and we all have a lot of photos in our iPhones, but do we have something that we want to save as a heritage for the future, for somebody who will live later, for our children? What are the important pictures? And for example, for myself, it was interesting story that I invited this artist who is leading the group Viecha to make a picture of my family at my home. We didn't have this carpet, but we borrowed the carpet, and it was a really important event for the family to gather all together. Everybody lives in different places, everybody have a different schedule, and so it was actually we didn't have family family pictures for 7 years. So it was quite important event, not just like the picture itself, but the process. And I think it also brings us to the question: do we have really these important things that we want to save for the future?
Well, I was invited to this research in Brest in August, September, not having done that much of research, so I began there, but I knew a little bit of prejudice, of course. So I find myself being an artist in this group that was supposed to look at the artist's status. So I asked them, my research group members, 5 of us, to then program me. So tell me, I'm the artist, I'm the visual artist here. So tell me your idea about how art and activism can deal in this research program that we were going to do. And the group was quite quiet. We had this discussion of heritagization and art is great, it can change, and all this sort of very strong. But then, so how can we reach the audience? I work with pedagogy as well, and I never work with small children. Small children are of course they're becoming our audience. They are our audience. So I began with a small group of children in Kulturhuset in Stockholm. So I have some answers. They want to save, for example, the Eiffel Tower, all France, not the snails that one eats, the Lego that one can build, and artists should build houses, and artists should make cars that runs with garbage and water, but not garbage that smells too much. So I have all these ideas that they sort of could program me to do, which is quite difficult. So I have a problem. But I became my own research rabbit in that sense. So when we talk, our group, the Heritagization group, when we have our Skype meetings, I just put the serviettes in my ear. So I became the rabbit, really. I'm the research rabbit. But I'm a cute rabbit that asks the children, what do you want to say for the future? And this is quite sort of in the context of dealing with Belarus, that at the same time has this parasite tax. And that is to do with people, citizens, that is not
employed. The citizens who do not have job were supposed to pay tax.
And how do you consider, and who is consider what a job is? Because what art, of course, plenty of artists has problem with that tax. And then to ask those questions in a regime like that, that's really, I didn't like myself doing that. I cannot see myself doing that. I want to meet the audience here in Gothenburg and ask those questions. But I became more of a cockroach. I became more of the Kafkanian cockroach to transform myself to be the negative, really unuseful being, or useful for oneself and to clean up and so forth. But to ask also the question to you, the audience, in a very negative manner. What do we want to tear down? What do we want to disappear from the earth? What do we don't want to have as heritage? So I'm pendling from being the cute rabbit. You see, I'm not particularly cute. I'm not that smelly, but I almost wanted to roll around in the dirt. So I'm sort of turning to the cockroach, being not such a useful artist. So please, tonight I'm going to be here as a rabbit, and I do have some questions for you, and I want to record you. So the questions are just behind the door. How I see the role of the artist is how I understand that the rabbit is today the one that runs in the marathons, in the front line. I mean, I'm not very much fond of sports, but I looked at the sport at marathon, Stockholm Marathon, and I see these runners that was really running so fast and being so quick, and then they just jumped off, and then they came back again. So yeah, of course that's the rabbit. So the rabbits are lead runners for the ones for to be followed by. So they have a job to run,
But not to win.
and not to win, but to be in front of and to keep the other ones running. It's quite as a metaphor. I mean, there are plenty in the rabbit metaphor that can be used in the sort of the role, in the role of the status role of the artist. So look at that. It's plenty of them there. As a bait, the rabbit has a bait because that is somehow a bait to be able to keep the force to be able to run. Or research rabbit that I find myself like a bit programmed by the audience.
The artist is supposed to be radical.
Yes.
Rabbito.
Radical.
Of course.
That's one
On the other
angle.
side, never conservative. Why is that? Is it possible to think of a good conservative artist?
I didn't follow you, sorry.
The sense of tradition doesn't need to be reactionary or
Traditionally doesn't need to be reactionary. It depends on tradition in what sense. No.
Chiara, in her article that we have not, she writes about that art can make heritage.
Yeah.
And in that sense, that's not traditional, it's something new, but it becomes a heritage. So in that way, I think it's two terms that we need to, but they are not the same.
Do you talk about art as heritage, creating heritage, as autonomous, an idea of autonomous?
But let's say that art and activism contributes to the building of heritage. So that is a part of it. It's not the same, but it's a part of a possibility to build and make new heritage, which is heritagization because it is the process and it's from underneath. This is sort of what we in our group discussed a lot and tried to grab from our different traditions that we work in also.
Yeah, maybe I can start with this in a bit. So I've also been, as Alina and Chiara, I've been part of collecting these examples, but from Sweden, through this project. But I'm also a master's student in cultural studies, so I'm writing my thesis on Kopparmälan, which is on that side, and also the shoreline.
In the other room? No, also here.
It's here also.
In the other room?
And the shoreline stone or memorial, as you can call it. So two examples of heritage, you can say. So through my work with the thesis, I'm actually looking at the people like been part of the processes of these two examples. So just trying to understand these two monuments. So the Shoreline Memorial is like a new monument, and Kopparmäla has been around for around 100 years, but it's been also now it's been contested, whatever. They've been trying to say that it should be removed or moved to another place in Gothenburg. So through also this collecting these examples, I'm very interested in the relation with the monuments or the artwork, or if you could call it that, and the public spaces.
But Elina, to follow your thoughts, I think it would be really interesting if you could talk a little bit about the difference between the Shoreline Memorial and Kopparmäla. Because it's two, I mean, one is it's a commission by the power itself, and the other one is a kind of counteract. It's coming from the grassroots and
exactly. I can say
maybe
something.
shortly.
Yeah, shortly I can say something. Yeah, of
follow
course.
your ideas.
Exactly.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, no, of course. The statue of Charles IX, King of Charles IX. The statue was made around 1904. It was placed in the square Kungsportsplatsen in the center of Gothenburg, and it's now a few years ago, like 2004, around 2014. It was two film producers came with this idea of maybe we should move this monument because it's they think, or they say that it stands for something old and maybe it represents something that something that we maybe shouldn't have on a pedestal. So they said that they started this kind of project, you can call it the Daddy Come Home project. So because they said that you should move this king because he's the father of Gustav II Adolf. So they want him moved to Gustav II Adolf. To the square where he stands, and then take them down from the pedestals, and then add the Queen Kristina Holstein Gottorp, which is the wife of King Charles IX, and maybe also add like a daughter or something like that. So kind of they think it should be like
family thing.
Family scene.
It's a family affair.
Exactly. So kind of and so they make that kind of scene, the family, and then taken down from the pedestals, and then add these one or two statues of women, and then they want to put this square which stands for human rights and trust, and something which is in the picture there. The Shoreline is a famous song by this pop band called Broder Daniel, which is a very famous Swedish band. So it's called, it says Play Shoreline, and it's also been a movement around Sweden with this Play Shoreline movement. And they put the anonymous artist. They put this in the park where the band had its last what do you call it? Concert, yes. Of course, this got a lot of media attention, and especially it was a Facebook group that started, and it was after 2 or 3 days they had like 5,000-6,000 followers. So the board of the park and nature, they said, okay, maybe we should keep this. Maybe we should be more flexible. So maybe we should keep it. So that's what happened. So it was allowed to stay in the park.
But it's not there now.
No, not when I was walking in the park last time. But so it's also been in Stockholm at Artes, the Center of Architecture and Design. So I also think that's very interesting because it came kind of from the bottom and then it came to the capital of Sweden, and it was been on this little tour, and then now it's
in the museum.
Yeah, in a museum, exactly.
Is it an anonymous producer or sender? Is it? Do anybody know who actually produced it?
No.
Has somebody said, I made it, I put it there?
No.
So, okay.
They want to be anonymous.
I think it's just interesting to know.
Yeah, no, they've been anonymous, and they also they have given it with a signature to the city. But you can't even see. They've been reading it so you can't see. Yeah.
Actually, one question about this sort of heritagization thing. I think that there are sort of two versions of that. So one is this sort of process that you were mentioning, that everything becomes heritage according to some sort of process scheme, which is very sort of well adaptable to sort of a process idea of humanistic studies or cultural studies, let's say, that we have this process of heritagization and we have researchers who research that process. But the other version, I think, of that concept, which is more critical, is that the whole society today is in a process of heritagization where there is no sort of perceptible future. I mean, there is no utopia for sure, but there is also no idea of some kind of future. So discussions about future matters are located to the past. And everything, actually, I mean, that's what is heritage. Even politics, even the future is sort of within the realm of the past, and our ideas of the future are there too. And then I think that the rabbit is very humane, actually, sort of running after that which is sort of the production of a future, but running into the past and not being able maybe to orient him or herself very well in what is happening. So we are also all rabbits in this sort of Alice in Wonderland show. Maybe before sort of 20, 30, 40 years ago, the rabbit was a hare hunting for the turtle and not approaching the turtle, not reaching the turtle, but now we are all rabbits.
Because we are retrotopias, we are looking at the past is the glamour, the everything that once was much better, and the old houses and all this sort of nostalgia is...
Old Soviet Belarusia.
I was quite recently in China, in a small village outside of Guangzhou, which is like this huge, enormous city. And they were showing me around, and they were telling me about how their everyday life was totally defined by the fact that everything from their childhood in this little remote area, except for the shrine, the religious kind of, we don't change this, everything had been replaced. There was absolutely nothing that connected them to some kind of local identification with this space. And they talked a lot about how they felt traumatized because these rapid changes, and also knowing that the tearing down of the buildings is also not because of the need of new buildings, or it's just because the state is actually using its power to say that we're going to have this program and it's going to take place like this. So I think that is like an interesting image. I mean, next to this retrotopia, where are we now? And then in another, and then we have Palmyra. I mean, we've been all watching it in social media or in TV. Like we see this like sort of heritage just being smashed.
I mean, there is a sort of commonality between what you refer to in China and what we have here with our museums and flea markets and this sort of affluence of heritage. And that is sort of epitomized by a famous line from a French poet, René Char, which he wrote in 1945, saying that our heritage is not preceded by any kind of testament. If there is a heritage, there should be a testament. There is no discourse on this heritage. There is no prescriptions of its meaning. And it's, I mean, it can be a supermarket of heritage that we have here, or it can be a zero heritage. But still, there is no idea of the past, or no critical reflection of the past that would sort of found an idea of the future. We are sort of passive.
And what shall we do with that? How should we use that?
And heritage is a great fun, of course, especially if there is no testament. It's the flea market.
It's up for grabs.
Yeah, but then you're open to construct your own past.
Sort of, seemingly free.
Yeah.
To, in Russian there is a dictum that nothing is as unpredictable as the past. About this Charles IX statue. Because he's so interesting, Charles IX, and he's really creating the failed Gothenburg. The Gothenburg that was not sustainable and that had to close down. Because that Gothenburg, it lasted for 1 year. 1604 Gothenburg. And it's really a great thing that it failed. And in a way it's sort of illustration of the contemporary situation. But then there is sort of this lack of knowledge of history. So that makes us sort of project the gender issue or the equality issue on the past, and we don't see the beauty of this king who failed to build the city, and his son then who sort of restored the city or repaired the thing and create all this mess for us, and to singularize him and do something interesting out of this Kopparmara. But no one knows history. And I think that if this would have been a Russian project or a Belarusian project, people would have known this. It's semiotic, it's significant, it's sort of tasty. History is tasty, and it tells something about future. That's the problem, I think, with heritage here, that no one bothers actually about the differentiation of the past and the colorfulness of the past.
But you talk also about resistance against the heritage that is, and it could be different ways, I think. Knowing something about him, and we have to go there because in fact it's an empty heritage for us, because it's not a place you go to demonstrate something. And also I think that
but we could make demonstrations with Charles IX.
But heritage, could it also be something personal? Something against the collective heritage.
A few years ago, two artists tied a lot of wood or lumber around Charles IX to commemorate all the witch hunts during his reign. And that's a positive way to use
Absolutely. There's also a small, on the other side of the Kopparmara, where Charles IX, if you is the more official name, there's also a small, I think a child statue on the other side of the street, which is from the children perspective. So a lot of people don't even see that this little girl, I think, is actually also something that reflects on Kopparmara, or it's like a sculpture, but from a child's perspective, which is also interesting because I don't think everyone sees that child because it's from the children's perspective. But there's also a comment, I think, in a way, also of that big statue on the other side.
Right, and she's also riding, but not the horse, but kind of a fantasy creature. Right?
Yes, but and that's also, came many years later as a comment also, I think, and like something that you contribute from another perspective, from another time. But it's, as you said earlier also, it's we will always create heritage. It's a very social thing to do because it's very connected to identity. And it's actually, Kopparmara, when it was created, it was like in the just a year before the union between Norway and Sweden. So it's everyone. It was also a very, so the nationalistic way of putting up. Now we're gonna put up a king that's been dead for many years.
It was a 3rd centenary of his Gothenburg.
Yeah. So that's also part of how we look back. Also, of course, of this we can see this patterns in our history, which is also connected to why a lot of people, I think, also this one is very connected to the identity of the Gothenburg people, because it's a very folklig thing to do, also because it symbolizes something also.
Minsk is a very unique city in that sense because it was bombed mostly and also destroyed by Soviets after the war. The center to build this kind of ideal city, to work with this kind of hollowness, this imposed authoritarianly imposed heritage, and then artists rediscovering. I've grown up and lived in Minsk for a long time. I got totally blind to that architecture. You just block this hollowness. You don't see Lenin monuments, you don't see anything. But then the artists rediscover it from another perspective. Okay, it's two-dimensional. It's a shift between dimensions. It's the kind of where we live. We live in between 3 and 2 dimensions, apparently in Belarus, or what that means.
And it's set design.
It opens up. So I started to value much more after the artist's work. I started to, wow, this is really cool architecture. This is something. Now it gives me a lot. Now it's really part of heritage that I take with me in my private life.
But it would be interesting to hear Dennis and Alina, how you feel about this interesting thing that Belarus has existed for, what is it, a couple of 100 years, according to some history, and then according to other histories, it has been going on forever. I find that really
It was Dmitry Plaks who said on the presentation of the Young Storm magazine that was dedicated to Belarus. Dmitry said a very nice phrase. Actually, the history of Belarus getting shorter and shorter. Because it's been rewritten every time with every new regime. It's been getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
But Alina, what do you think about that? Can you talk about it, about like how the relative idea,
being in our case, I think you have to be extremely critical and kind of sometimes choose your own narrative. Like there is a totally authorized state narrative, and then you state to question it and to be critical. But what is there is no alternative consensus on alternative thing. Mm-hmm. So that's why you're in a process I would say kind of all the groups or persons they have to create their own understanding of this identity because it's not stable. You are not agree with the ones the state proposed, and so then you have to come into the process.
So it's up to each and everyone?
Yeah, more or less people, I would say now it's more or less communities. People within some communities.
Yeah, that's an important difference.
They kind of share the values and then share the understanding of identity or the history or from what time to think the state exists or the country exists, and it brings you to the community that you okay, if you think it was created after Russian Empire, so you are with the one group. If you think it's from 90s, you're with another group, and then it's and on different questions you would join the different groups. No more.
Just to finish off, there is this website.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that?
No.